In Episode 26, Test Segmentation and Controls for Credible Assurance, we set a clear expectation that matches the payment card industry professional PCIP assessor lens. Evidence-driven testing that proves boundaries and the effectiveness of controls in plain, defensible terms. The goal is not to admire diagrams or accept confident statements about air gaps, but to gather artifacts that show what traffic can and cannot do, who can and cannot cross, and how the organization would know if something changed. The Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCIDS, hinges on this kind of verification, because segmentation reduces both likelihood and impact, and only tested segmentation deserves to narrow scope. Your job is to evaluate whether testing is designed around real risk, executed with repeatable methods, and documented so another reviewer could retrace the steps and reach the same conclusions. When you hold to that bar, segmentation stops being an architectural hope and becomes a live-in, provable control. Maps beat slogans. Before a single probe is launched, map the network paths, management planes, and shared services that could bypass enforced boundaries, because hidden side roads are where segmentation fails. The management network that touches hypervisors and switches, the backup system that pokes agents in every zone, the monitoring stack that scrapes metrics, the directory that authenticates service accounts, and the update service that drips packages across environments, each of these can tunnel through otherwise strict rules. The map should depict not only IP ranges and routing domains, but also identity relationships, brokered access points, and out-of-band mechanisms like console servers or keyboard video mouse switches. As an assessor, you are looking for places where a trusted tool enjoys broad reach with weak oversight, or where convenience created a shared subnet that nobody revisited after a migration. Put those paths on your checklist. They are frequent culprits when tests surprise teams who thought the wall was higher. Method selection matters because different techniques illuminate different truths. Packet traces prove what actually crossed at a moment. Access Control List, ACL, reveal the declared intent. Credentialed scans show what a real principal can do. And route verification confirms whether traffic could reach a boundary in the first place. Use a blend that starts with route reachability to avoid chasing ghosts, then reviews ACLs and security group rules to learn stated policy, and finally validates with live traffic captures and authenticated probes from representative hosts. When policy and packets disagree, believe the packets and investigate the gap. Because devices can inherit rules, process them in unexpected sequences, or carry shadow entries left by old projects. In an exam scenario, the strongest answer pairs a human-readable rationale with test methods that directly answer the scoping question, not just, did the tool run? Coverage must be representative, not exhaustive theater. Build samples that reflect systems, protocols, and time windows that truly matter. Peaks when batch jobs run, quiet hours when maintenance opens doors, and business as usual periods for baseline comparison. Include sources from outside the CDE that attackers would plausibly control, workstations, jump zones, and management networks, and destinations that matter most, payment applications, databases, and administrative daemons on hosts. Select protocol mixes that mirror reality, database ports, remote administration services, message brokers, file shares, service discovery, and time synchronization. When field devices are part of the story, test from retail or branch subnets too, because those edges often carry legacy exceptions. Document why each sample was chosen and which risk it covers so your future self or another assessor can explain the logic behind the grid rather than guess at intentions. Deny rules must be tested with the discipline of negative evidence. Launch attempts that should fail, and then capture the observable blocks with timestamps, source and destination, ports, protocol, and the boundary device that enforced the decision. Screenshots of connection refused without context are weak. Packet captures that show a reset from a firewall interface paired with device logs citing a specific rule number are strong. Where the control is identity-aware, use a principal with known group membership to show that denial depends on role, not just on network placement. Repeat at least one negative test outside normal hours to ensure no maintenance policy relaxations open a temporary lane. If a block does not appear in logs, treat that as a finding, even when connectivity failed, because silent refusal starves investigations and undermines monitoring promises. Deny must leave a trail, or it is fragile. Allowed flows deserve equally rigorous proof. If a path is necessary, show that it is necessary by tying it to a documented business function and an accountable owner who certifies the purpose. Then, prove it is encrypted end-to-end with current protocols and ciphers that match policy. And show that boundary and host logs monitor the traffic in a way that supports detection and response. Corroborating artifacts might include a packet capture that reveals a mutually authenticated TLS session, application logs that record the transaction tied to a service account, and a monitoring dashboard that alerts on unusual volume. Allowed should never mean unseen or unbounded. It should mean justified, minimized, and observable. If an allowed flow is old and nobody can name its owner within a day, treat it as a deprecation candidate and track the retirement with a change ticket that updates diagrams and rules. Wireless, virtual private network, VPN, and remote tools deserve explicit attention because they are designed to cross distances, and distance hides surprises. For wireless, test from guest and corporate SSIDs to ensure neither can reach CDE segments directly or through shared infrastructure like captive portals, and corroborate with controller logs that show enforced client isolation. For VPN, verify split tunnel policies and ensure that clients who can reach the internet directly cannot also reach CDE subnets without passing through monitored gateways. Then test posture checks that should block unhealthy devices. For remote tools, screen sharing, remote assistance, management agents, trace the path from the helper's console to the target and confirm that brokered connections do not step around firewalls via cloud relays nobody thought to log. When a tool vendor says, "It just works," translate that as, "Prove the route and show me the records." Logs at the boundaries are not optional. They are the measurement that turns architecture into assurance. Verify that boundary devices capture source, destination, action, and byte counts, and that timestamps align with host logs so correlation is possible without gymnastics. Then confirm that correlated host signals exist, authentication events on the receiving system, application entries that reflect permitted transactions, and intrusion prevention or endpoint detections when something suspicious appears. Sample a known good allowed flow and a known bad denied attempt and follow both across tools to show that the monitoring story is coherent. If log storage cannot answer simple questions, who tried to reach what, when, and from where, then segmentation testing can pass in the lab while response fails in production. Evidence must connect the line between packets on the wire and records on disk. Documentation makes results reproducible, which is the standard for credible assurance. Record findings with screenshots that include system clocks, configuration excerpts that show active rules and versions, packet captures saved with hashes, and the names of observers who witnessed key steps. When a device requires changes to expose its configuration, capture the change ticket and the before and after state so another assessor can see the same thing later. Avoid ambiguous annotations. Explain what each artifact proves in 1 or 2 sentences that a new team member could understand next year. Organize the package by test objective. Deny validations together, allowed flow proofs together, administrative path checks together, so the story reads like a series of answered questions rather than a pile of files. Reproducibility is not about volume. It is about clarity. Gaps must not linger. When a test reveals an unexpected route, an open port that nobody claims, or a monitoring blind spot, log a finding that states the risk in plain language, assign an owner, and reference the change ticket that will close it. After remediation, retest the exact scenario and attach closure evidence, new packet captures, updated rule exports, fresh screenshots with timestamps to the same record, creating a single thread from discovery to resolution. If a fix requires multiple teams, note the dependencies and keep partial retests as you go to avoid regressions. Assessors look for this loop because it demonstrates operational integrity, the ability to change the environment safely and to prove that the change had the desired effect. Without the retest, a fixed label is a hope, not a control. Residual risk deserves daylight. Summarize what remains after remediation. Accepted exposures with business justification, compensating controls that reduce likelihood or impact, and the specific triggers that will force re-review. New vendors, topology changes, cloud migrations, or policy updates. Tie each residual item to an owner and an expiry, or checkpoint, because permanent risk waivers often outlive the reason they existed. If a compensating control holds the line, say strict MFA on a broker that mediates a necessary but risky flow, capture the artifacts that prove it actually operates and is monitored. Clarity here is what allows scope decisions to stand up to audits and what prevents forgotten exceptions from becoming tomorrow's incident report. Change is the enemy of untested trust, so define the events that require post-change validation and the speed at which it must occur. New subnets, firewall migrations, load balancer introductions, identity provider changes, and tool replacements all alter the terrain in ways that can quietly create bypasses. The checklist for post-change validation should name the tests to rerun, the evidence to capture, and the people to inform, and it should live where change managers see it before approvals close. Quarterly segmentation checks complement this event-driven discipline by catching drift that slips through quiet months, and by exercising the muscles of documentation and correlation on a cadence that keeps everyone sharp. A calendar invite with real owners beats a policy paragraph every time. People make testing credible, so note roles and separation of duties in your plan. The person who designed a boundary should not be the only one who tests it, and the person who runs a packet capture should do so with a witness who can attest to timing and source. Where vendors maintain devices, include customer-side observers in sessions to ensure the evidence belongs to the organization, not to a departing consultant's laptop. Require the testers use accounts with documented privileges that match the scenario, and include access approvals in the evidence set so a complete reader sees legal authority alongside technical results. The assessor lens values these small governance details because they prevent accidental overreach and create trust that the artifacts are both accurate and legitimately obtained. Finally, tie segmentation testing back to the exam's core habit, traceability from claim to proof. A good assessment can pick any scoping statement: no direct admin access to the CDE from user workstations. Guest Wi-Fi cannot reach payment devices. Backups do not transit the CDE boundary except via the broker, and immediately pull the test that answered it, the artifacts that prove the answer, the gaps found, the fixes applied, and the revalidation that closed the loop. This is what credible assurance looks like: clear questions, appropriate methods, legible evidence, and an environment that changes safely because testing is part of the change, not an afterthought. When you see this rhythm, you can sign your name with confidence. Close with action that makes the future easier to trust. Schedule quarterly segmentation checks that target the highest impact boundaries and rotate through management planes, shared services, and remote access paths so the program never grows lopsided. In parallel, implement a post-change validation checklist now, attach it to the change process that moves rules and routes, and insist that closure requires the same level of evidence you would accept during a formal review. If you want a tangible win this week, pick one shared service with broad reach backups, monitoring, or directory, and test its path and logging thoroughly. Fix what you find and capture the before and after story in one place. Small, repeatable steps make scope honest, keep surprises small, and give you the kind of artifacts that pass any reasonable test an examiner or auditor sets in front of you. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.